Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small heartfelt request. Please subscribe to my channel. Give this video a like. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes a difference. The funeral director handed me the guest book at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was supposed to be dead. "Lovely service," Mrs. Henderson from down the street whispered as she signed her name. "Your daughter was so brave during the eulogy." I stood frozen in my black dress, clutching the funeral program with my own photograph printed on it. Margaret Rose Caldwell, 1959 to 2024. Beloved mother, devoted teacher. The flowers were beautiful. White lilies, exactly what I would have chosen. My daughter Sarah was greeting mourners by the casket, her eyes red from crying, real tears. My sister Helen was comforting my elderly mother, who kept dabbing her eyes with tissues. Everyone was genuinely grieving for me, but I was standing right there, very much alive. The strangest part wasn't that someone had faked my death. It was that they'd done it so thoroughly, so convincingly, that even my family believed it. The obituary in the Springfield Herald listed my teaching career at Roosevelt Elementary, my volunteer work at the food bank, my love of gardening. All true. What wasn't true was that I'd died in a car accident on Highway 47 last Thursday. I'd actually spent Thursday morning grading third-grade math tests and Thursday afternoon at Target buying new dish towels. By Thursday night, I was watching Netflix in my flannel pajamas, completely unaware that somewhere across town, a death certificate was being filed with my name on it. The only reason I discovered my own funeral was because Mrs. Patterson from the school called to ask if I was feeling better. "I heard about the terrible accident," she'd said. "Should I send the children sympathy cards?" That's when I realized the phone calls had stopped, the emails, even the junk mail. For 3 days my world had gone quiet, and I'd been grateful for the peace. Now I understood why. I slipped out of the funeral home before anyone could recognize me. In my car, hands shaking, I checked my bank accounts on my phone. Frozen. My credit cards, canceled. My insurance policy, in the process of being paid out to my beneficiaries. Someone had erased me from existence with paperwork and bureaucracy. But who had the access, the knowledge, the motivation to kill me off so completely? And more importantly, why were they so confident I'd never be able to prove who I really was? What you don't realize about being declared dead is how quickly the world moves on without you. I drove home from my own funeral in a daze, expecting to find police cars or investigation teams. Instead, I found my house dark and empty, exactly as I'd left it Thursday morning. The newspaper was still on the porch, 3 days' worth now, yellowing in the March drizzle. My key worked. That was my first surprise. If someone was orchestrating my death, why hadn't they changed the locks? Inside, everything looked normal. My coffee cup from Thursday morning sat in the sink. The stack of papers I'd been grading lay spread across the kitchen table, red ink marks half finished on Timothy Morrison's fractions worksheet. The peace lily on my windowsill drooped slightly. Thirsty. I called my daughter first. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "You've reached Sarah. I can't come to the phone right now." Her voice sounded hollow, exhausted. I hung up without leaving a message. What would I say? "Hi, honey. It's Mom. Sorry about the funeral. Awkward." My sister Helen answered on the first ring. "Hello?" Her voice was thick with crying. "Helen, it's me." Silence. Then, "Who is this? This isn't funny." "It's Margaret, your sister." "I'm not dead, Helen." The line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Stop it. Stop this right now. Whoever you are, this is cruel and sick. My sister died Thursday night. I identified her body myself." "You identified my body?" "At the county morgue. Thursday night at 11 p.m. The accident." Helen's voice broke. Her face was damaged, but the birthmark on her shoulder, the scar from when she fell off her bike at age 12. It was Margaret. My hand went instinctively to my shoulder. The birthmark Helen mentioned was there, a small strawberry-shaped mark I'd had since birth. The scar, too, though it had faded over the decades. Helen, I'm standing in my kitchen right now. I'm looking at the grocery list I wrote Thursday morning. Milk, bread, those crackers Mom likes. Anyone could know those things. Anyone could have been in her house. Helen's voice turned cold. Whoever you are, you're disturbed. Don't call this number again. She hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling truly alone for the first time. If my own sister couldn't recognize my voice, if she'd identified a body she believed was mine, then whoever was behind this had planned far beyond simple paperwork fraud. They'd needed a body, a woman matching my description with my distinguishing marks. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. 4:15 p.m. I walked to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box on my dresser. Everything was there. My mother's wedding ring, the pearl earrings Sarah gave me for my 50th birthday, even the cheap silver bracelet I'd bought myself last summer. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. It was as if I'd simply vanished from the world while my possessions remained, waiting for my return. I thought about the body Helen had identified. A woman with my birthmark, my scar. Either an incredible coincidence or... My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. You're supposed to be dead. Keep it that way. For the first time since leaving the funeral home, I felt truly afraid. The text message made one thing crystal clear. Someone was watching me. I drew all the curtains in my house and double-checked the locks. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started making a list of everyone who had access to my personal information. My birthmark wasn't exactly public knowledge. Bank employees who'd seen me fill out loan applications. Doctors who'd examined me. My ex-husband David, though we'd been divorced for 15 years. A few close friends who'd seen me in swimsuits over the decades. But that scar Helen mentioned? That was family knowledge. Only Helen, my parents, and maybe one or two childhood friends would remember a bike accident from 40 years ago. My landline rang at 7:30 p.m. I hesitated before answering. Margaret? The voice was male, unfamiliar. Who's asking? Detective Ray Morrison, Springfield Police. I need to speak with you about your death. I nearly laughed. My death seems to be greatly exaggerated. Ma'am, this isn't a joke. I'm investigating irregularities in your case. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Rosewood Diner on Oak Street, 8 a.m. How do I know you're actually a police detective? Because I'm the only person in this town who believes you might actually be alive. I agreed to meet him, then spent the night lying awake, listening for sounds outside my house. Every car that passed made my heart race. Every creak of settling wood sounded like footsteps. At 3 a.m., I crept to my living room window and peered through a gap in the curtains. A dark sedan sat across the street, engine off, but I could see the glow of a cigarette in the driver's seat. Someone was definitely watching. By morning, the car was gone. I dressed carefully in jeans and a sweater, tied my hair back, and wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy. At Rosewood Diner, I chose a booth in the back corner where I could see both entrances. Detective Morrison arrived exactly at 8 a.m. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and coffee stains on his white shirt. He slid into the booth across from me and studied my face. "You look just like her," he said quietly. "I am her. I'm Margaret Caldwell." He pulled out a manila folder. The woman who died Thursday night was found in a burned car on Highway 47. Single vehicle accident, apparently fell asleep at the wheel and hit a tree. Car caught fire. That's terrible, but it wasn't me. I was home Thursday night. Can anyone verify that? I thought about it. I'd watched TV alone, gone to bed early, no phone calls, no visitors. No, but surely you can tell I'm alive. Morrison opened the folder and showed me a photograph. It was the driver's license of the woman they'd identified as Margaret Caldwell. Same height, same weight, same hair color. The photo was mine, my actual driver's license photo from 2022. This ID was in her purse, Morrison said, along with your credit cards, insurance card, and $23 in cash. Exactly the contents your daughter described from when she cleaned out your purse after the funeral. The pancakes I'd ordered turned cold on my plate. Someone hadn't just found a woman who resembled me, they'd created one. Detective, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully. Have you ever heard of anyone else in Springfield who looks exactly like someone else, similar enough to fool family members? Morrison's expression changed. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. As a matter of fact, yes. 2 years ago, we had a case. A woman claimed her husband was cheating with someone who looked identical to her. When we investigated, we found a small medical clinic on the outskirts of town. They specialized in, let's call it, cosmetic reconstruction. My blood ran cold. Plastic surgery? More than that, they were creating what they called life doubles, people who looked exactly like other people. The clinic shut down after the investigation, but we never found all their records. He pulled out another document. Your death certificate lists the attending physician as Dr. Marcus Webb. Dr. Webb was the head of that clinic. The breakfast rush noise around us faded to white noise. Knowledge can be more dangerous than ignorance, especially when you're supposed to be dead. Detective Morrison walked me to my car, checking over his shoulder twice. Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to be very careful. If someone went to this much trouble to fake your death, they won't be happy to discover you're still breathing. What do I do? I can't stay hidden forever. I have a life, a job, family. Right now you don't. Legally, you're deceased. Your job has hired a substitute teacher. Your family is planning to sell your house. Until we can prove what happened, you're invisible. He handed me his business card. Don't go home tonight. Find somewhere safe to stay, somewhere no one would think to look for you. I drove aimlessly for an hour, thinking about the clinic Morrison had mentioned. Who had arranged this? Who wanted me dead badly enough to hire someone to replace me? The answer came to me as I sat in the parking lot of a grocery store where I'd shopped every week for 10 years, now afraid to go inside in case someone recognized the dead woman, my ex-husband David. Our divorce had been bitter. He'd fought the alimony payments for years, claimed I'd gotten more than my fair share of our assets. Last month, his lawyer had called about modifying the support agreement. I'd refused. David worked in insurance. He understood the system, knew about death benefits and life insurance payouts. More importantly, he'd been married to me for 12 years. He knew about my birthmark, my childhood scar. But would he really kill someone just to avoid paying me alimony? I needed proof. I drove to the Springfield Public Library and used their computer to search for Dr. Marcus Webb. What I found made my hands shake. 3 years ago, Dr. Webb had been investigated for insurance fraud. The charges were dropped, but the newspaper articles described his revolutionary facial reconstruction techniques and mentioned several patients who'd undergone procedures to look like other people. One name kept appearing in the articles. David Caldwell, listed as a consulting specialist in insurance verification. My ex-husband hadn't just known about the clinic. He'd worked with them. I printed everything I could find and stuffed the papers into my purse. As I left the library, a woman approached me in the parking lot. "Excuse me, are you Margaret Caldwell?" My heart stopped. She was elderly, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a gentle voice. No, I think you have me confused with someone else." "Oh, I'm so sorry. You look exactly like a woman I know. Well, knew. She passed away last week. Such a tragedy." The woman walked away, shaking her head. I sat in my car, realizing the full scope of my problem. People would recognize me everywhere I went, but instead of welcoming me back from the dead, they'd think they were seeing a ghost. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "Rosewood Diner was a mistake. Last warning." They'd been watching me meet with Morrison. They knew I was investigating. I started the car and drove to the only place I could think of where no one would expect to find a dead woman, the cemetery where Margaret Caldwell was supposedly buried. Oakwood Cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon. I found my own grave easily. The fresh dirt and new headstones stood out among the weathered markers. The inscription was simple, Margaret Rose Caldwell, beloved mother and teacher. Someone had left flowers, fresh roses, probably from my daughter. I knelt beside my own grave and felt the strangest sensation. Part of me wanted to stay dead. Margaret Caldwell's life had been ordinary, predictable. She paid bills, graded papers, worried about her aging mother. But this woman kneeling at her own grave, she was someone entirely different. Standing at your own graveside changes your perspective on what matters and what doesn't. I spent the night at a motel 40 miles outside Springfield, paying cash and using a fake name. The clerk didn't look up from his magazine as he handed me the key to room 14. For the first time in my life, I was truly anonymous. I spread Morrison's documents and my library research across the thin bedspread. The connections were becoming clearer. Dr. Webb's clinic had specialized in creating identity doubles for insurance fraud. David had worked as their consultant, helping them understand how to make the documentation foolproof. But I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed proof that would hold up in court. The next morning, I drove back to Springfield and parked across the street from David's house. Our house, technically, until the divorce. He still lived there with his new wife, Patricia, a woman 20 years younger who'd been his dental hygienist. At 8:15 a.m., David emerged in his business suit, kissed Patricia goodbye, and drove away in his silver BMW. Patricia left an hour later in her red Honda. I waited 30 minutes, then walked to the back door and used the spare key that had been under the fake rock for 15 years. David had never been imaginative about security. The house looked different. Patricia had redecorated with modern furniture and bright colors, but David's home office remained unchanged. The same heavy desk, the same filing cabinets, the same habit of leaving important papers scattered everywhere. I searched quickly but carefully, photographing documents with my phone, insurance policies, bank statements, correspondence with lawyers. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a folder labeled MC Project. Inside were photographs, pictures of me, but not me. A woman who looked exactly like me, but the photos showed her in places I'd never been, wearing clothes I didn't own. The same woman, I realized, who was probably buried in my grave. There were medical records showing extensive plastic surgery to match my appearance, a payment record for $50,000 made to Dr. Webb's clinic, and a handwritten note in David's messy scrawl, final payment due upon verification of death certificate. I photographed everything, my hands trembling with anger. David hadn't just wanted me dead for the insurance money, he'd wanted me erased so completely that no one would even remember I'd existed. The sound of a car in the driveway made me freeze. Through the office window, I saw Patricia's Honda pulling in. She was supposed to be at work. I grabbed the folder and ran for the back door, but I could hear her key in the front lock. I made it to the kitchen just as she called out, "Hello, is someone here?" I pressed myself against the wall beside the refrigerator, holding my breath. Patricia's footsteps moved through the living room, then toward the office. "David?" she called. "Did you come home?" I heard her pick up the phone, probably calling David's work. This was my chance. I slipped out the back door and walked calmly to my car, forcing myself not to run. As I drove away, I saw David's BMW turning onto his street. If I'd stayed 5 minutes longer, we would have come face to face. Back at the motel, I called Detective Morrison. "I have proof," I told him. "David orchestrated the whole thing. I have photographs, payment records, medical files." "Where are you?" I told him about the motel. 20 minutes later, he knocked on my door, but he wasn't alone. A woman in a business suit stood beside him. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI. This case has gotten bigger than we thought." Agent Chen sat on the room's single chair while Morrison leaned against the wall. "Mrs. Caldwell, your ex-husband's clinic operation involved at least 12 other cases across 3 states. People being declared dead so others could collect insurance, inherit property, avoid debt obligations. How many innocent people died? We're still counting, but based on what you've uncovered, we have enough to make arrests. The question is, are you willing to help us?" I thought about the woman in my grave, whoever she was. Someone's daughter, maybe someone's mother. She'd been murdered so David could avoid paying me $2,200 a month in alimony. "What do you need me to do?" Agent Chen smiled grimly. "We need you to stay dead a little longer." The hardest part about being dead is watching your family grieve for you. Agent Chen's plan was simple, but risky. I would remain deceased while they built a case against David and Dr. Webb. They needed time to gather evidence from the other fraud cases, to locate other victims, to build something that would hold up in federal court. "How long?" I asked. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. 2 months of watching my daughter cry at my grave. 2 months of my elderly mother believing she'd outlived her child. 2 months of my students wondering why their teacher disappeared without saying goodbye. "I can't do it. I can't let them suffer like that." Morrison leaned forward. "Margaret, if you resurface now, before we make the arrests, what do you think happens? David knows you're alive. Dr. Webb knows you're alive. They've already killed one person to fake your death." Agent Chen nodded. "These people aren't going to just give up and confess. They'll try to make you actually dead." I stared at the water stain on the motel ceiling, thinking about my choices. Stay hidden and let my family mourn, or risk my life and theirs by going public. If I do this, I want to see my daughter, just once, from a distance. Too dangerous. Then this conversation is over. I stood up and walked toward the door. "Wait." Chen sighed. "We might be able to arrange something. Very careful, very controlled." 3 days later, I sat in a rental car outside Roosevelt Elementary, watching my replacement teacher lead my 3rd grade class to recess. The children looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. Timothy Morrison, whose fractions homework still sat unfinished on my kitchen table, was playing alone by the fence. I wanted to get out of the car, to tell him I was sorry for leaving so suddenly, to finish helping him understand why 3/4 was bigger than 2/3. But Timothy would go home and tell his parents he'd seen his dead teacher, and within hours, everyone would know. So I sat in my car and watched my life continue without me. That afternoon, I followed Sarah's car to the grocery store. My daughter looked tired, older than her 32 years. She moved through the aisles mechanically, buying frozen dinners and instant coffee. Food for someone who'd forgotten how to take care of herself. In the checkout line, she fumbled with her wallet, and I saw her hands were shaking. The cashier, a teenager with purple hair, was patient as Sarah counted out exact change. "I'm sorry," Sarah told her. "I haven't been sleeping well." "No worries," the girl said kindly. "Take your time." I wanted to walk over there to put my arms around my daughter, to tell her that grief was hard work and she needed to eat real meals and get proper rest. Instead, I sat in my car and cried. That evening, Agent Chen called with an update. "We've identified 6 more victims in similar cases. All women, all with ex-husbands or family members who benefited from life insurance payouts. 6 women who were murdered? 6 women who are supposed to be dead, but probably aren't. Margaret, this is bigger than insurance fraud. This is a systematic operation, and you're our only living witness who can prove it." The next morning, I drove to the cemetery again. Someone had left new flowers on my grave. Not roses this time, but daisies, my mother's favorite flower. I knelt beside the headstone and spoke quietly to whoever was buried there. "I don't know who you are, but I promise I'll make this right. David won't get away with what he did to you, what he did to me." A shadow fell across the grave, and I looked up to see my mother standing there, holding her purse with both hands, staring at me with wide eyes. "Margaret," she whispered. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide whether to blow my cover or break my mother's heart all over again. Some choices you make with your heart, not your head, and face the consequences later. "Mom," I stood up slowly, still not sure what I was going to say. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached out with one shaking hand to touch my face. "You're real. You're actually real. I can explain everything, but not here. Not now." I looked around the cemetery, checking for anyone who might be watching. Mom, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm not supposed to be alive right now. What do you mean? Someone tried to kill me. They think they succeeded. If they find out I'm alive, they'll try again. My mother's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. At 78, she'd survived my father's death, 2 hip replacements, and 40 years of teaching high school mathematics. She was tougher than she looked. What do you need me to do? Go home. Act normal. Don't tell anyone you saw me, not even Sarah. Can you do that? For how long? A few more weeks. The police are building a case. She nodded slowly. Your father always said you were too smart for your own good. I suppose he was right. She hugged me quickly, fiercely, then walked away without looking back. I watched her get into her blue Buick and drive off, carrying the weight of another secret. That afternoon, my phone rang. Detective Morrison. We have a problem. David's lawyer called this morning. They want to expedite the insurance payout. Instead of the usual 6-month waiting period, they're pushing for immediate payment due to clear evidence of accidental death. How much money are we talking about? Your life insurance policy is for $300,000. Your teacher's pension has a death benefit of another $150,000. Plus, David inherits your half of the house, which is worth about $200,000 after the mortgage. I did the math. David stood to gain over $600,000 from my death, minus whatever he'd paid Dr. Webb's clinic. Even after expenses, he'd make enough money to live comfortably for years. There's something else, Morrison continued. We did some digging into your replacement at school. The woman they hired to finish your school year, her name is Patricia Webb. Webb? As in Dr. Webb? His daughter. She applied for your job 3 days before your supposed death. Her teaching certificate was issued in Nevada 2 weeks ago, but she's been living in Springfield for 6 months. The pieces clicked together. Patricia Webb hadn't just happened to be available to take my job. She'd been positioned there, waiting. How deep does this go? I asked. We're still figuring that out, but it looks like Dr. Webb's operation was more than just plastic surgery and fake deaths. They were creating entire replacement lives. I thought about Patricia Webb standing in front of my classroom, teaching my students, maybe even living in my house eventually if David's plan had worked completely. Detective, I want to see her. I want to see the woman who was supposed to take over my life. Absolutely not. Not to confront her. Just to observe, to understand what they were planning. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. There's a faculty meeting at your school tomorrow at 4 p.m. All teachers required to attend. If you wanted to observe from outside the building, you're supposed to be protecting me, not helping me stake out schools. I'm trying to catch the people who killed an innocent woman and tried to erase you from existence. Sometimes that requires unconventional methods. The next day, I parked across from Roosevelt Elementary and watched through binoculars as teachers filed into the building. I recognized most of them, colleagues I'd worked with for 8 years. At 4:10, a woman I didn't recognize walked through the front door. She was about my height and build, with shoulder-length brown hair similar to mine. From a distance, she could have passed for my younger sister. This was Patricia Webb, the woman who was supposed to become the new Margaret Caldwell after the old one had been safely buried and forgotten. I watched her interact with the other teachers, laughing at something Principal Rodriguez said, shaking hands with Mrs. Patterson from the kindergarten class. She fit in easily, naturally, because she'd been studying to be me. The most unsettling thing about seeing your replacement isn't how different they are, but how easily they fit into your life. Patricia Webb had my mannerisms. She stood with one hand on her hip when listening, just like I did. She tucked her hair behind her left ear when concentrating. She even carried the same style of teacher bag I'd used for years. But the detail that made my blood run cold was smaller. As she walked to her car after the faculty meeting, I saw her keys. The keychain was a small metal apple with World's Best Teacher engraved on it. The exact same keychain Sarah had given me for my birthday 3 years ago. Someone had been studying my life in extraordinary detail. I followed her home, keeping several cars back. She lived in a small apartment complex on Maple Street, about 2 miles from the school. As she parked, I saw her wave to an elderly man watering his garden. Friendly, neighborly, already establishing herself as a member of the community, Agent Chen called while I was sitting in my car, watching Patricia's apartment. "Margaret, we need to move faster than planned. Dr. Webb flew to Mexico yesterday. We think he's getting ready to disappear." "What about the other victims?" 3 more women have been located alive, hiding like you. 2 others..." She paused. 2 others are actually dead. The bodies in their graves really are them. I felt sick. This wasn't just fraud. It was murder, planned and systematic. "We're making arrests tomorrow. David, Patricia Webb, and 2 clinic employees we've identified, but we need you to come in officially. Your testimony is crucial." "What happens to my family?" "We'll inform them tonight that you're alive before the arrests are made public. Sarah and your mother deserve to hear it from us, not from the news." I thought about my daughter, about the grief she'd been carrying for 3 weeks, about my mother, keeping her secret, about my students, probably wondering if they'd done something wrong to make their teacher disappear. "Agent Chen, I want to be the one to tell Sarah." "Too risky. David doesn't know we're moving tomorrow." "Then let me tell her tonight before you arrest him." There was silence on the line. Then, "You'll have 1 FBI agent with you. Any sign of trouble, any indication David or his people are watching, and you're gone. Understood?" An hour later, I sat in my car outside Sarah's apartment building, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello?" "Sarah, it's Mom." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her sharp intake of breath. "This isn't funny. Whoever this is, stop calling me." "Honey, I need you to listen to my voice. Really listen. It's me. My mother is dead. I buried her. I spoke at her funeral. You said I taught you to be strong, to question everything, to trust your instincts. You said I told you that love doesn't end when someone dies, it just changes shape." Another long pause. Those had been Sarah's exact words during the eulogy I'd watched from the back of the funeral home. "Mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm coming up. I'll explain everything." Agent Martinez waited in the lobby while I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Sarah opened her apartment door before I could knock, and we stared at each other for a moment that felt like forever. Then she collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "I don't understand any of this." I held her on her couch and told her everything, about finding my own funeral, about David and the clinic, about the woman who died in my place. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, determination. "So Dad killed someone just to avoid paying you alimony?" "Your stepfather," I corrected. "And yes." "What happens now?" "Tomorrow morning, the FBI arrests everyone involved. This nightmare ends." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "The woman they buried in your place, do we know who she was?" "Not yet, but I promise you we're going to find out. She deserves to have her real name on a headstone." As I prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed my hand. "Mom, what if something goes wrong tomorrow? What if David figures out you're alive before they arrest him?" I squeezed her hand. "Then you keep being the strong, smart woman I raised, and you remember that some things are worth fighting for." The morning of the arrests, I woke up in a safe house feeling like I was preparing for my own resurrection. Agent Chen had stationed me in a hotel room across town with Agent Martinez as my guard. From my window, I could see the sunrise over Springfield, the same sky I'd looked at every morning for 15 years, not knowing this would be the day Margaret Caldwell officially came back from the dead. At 7:30 a.m., Chen called. "Teams are in position. David's at home. Patricia Webb is at her apartment. Dr. Webb was picked up at the airport trying to board a flight to Tijuana. What about the clinic records? We found them. Margaret, there were 43 cases over 3 years. Not all were murders. Some were people who wanted to disappear, start new lives, but at least 8 women were killed to provide bodies for insurance fraud. 8 women. 8 families who'd buried someone and grieved, never knowing they were victims of an elaborate crime. At 8:15, Chen called again. David's in custody, no problems. Patricia Webb surrendered without incident. But we have a complication. What kind of complication? The body in your grave isn't who we thought it was. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Her fingerprints came back with a match. Margaret, the woman buried in your grave is Rebecca Chen, my sister. The phone line went dead quiet. I could hear Agent Martinez talking to someone in the hallway, but it sounded far away. Agent Chen? She disappeared 18 months ago. We all thought she'd just walked away. She'd been struggling with depression, financial problems. When she vanished, we assumed she'd started over somewhere else. I'm so sorry. My sister didn't just happen to look like you, Margaret. They chose her specifically because she was alone, vulnerable, and had family in law enforcement. If anyone came looking for her, they'd assume we were trying to solve the case ourselves. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Dr. Webb's organization hadn't just killed people for money. They'd targeted victims whose disappearances would be dismissed or misunderstood. At 10 a.m., I was officially declared alive again. The Springfield Police Department held a press conference explaining that Margaret Rose Caldwell had been the victim of an elaborate insurance fraud scheme and was, in fact, unharmed. The news spread quickly. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, neighbors, colleagues from school. Everyone wanted to know what it felt like to come back from the dead. But the call that mattered most came at 11:30. Mrs. Caldwell, this is Principal Rodriguez. We'd love to have you back. I'll be there Monday morning, I told him. The hardest part was driving to my house for the first time as a living person. The locks hadn't been changed, but everything felt different. Sarah had cleaned out the refrigerator, boxed up my mail, watered my plants. She'd been preparing to sell the house, to close the final chapter of my life. I sat in my kitchen and looked at Timothy Morrison's math worksheet, still spread across the table. The red ink had faded slightly, but my half-finished corrections were still there. Good work on problems 1 to 5, I'd written in the margin. Remember, bigger denominators mean smaller pieces. Such a simple lesson. I wondered if Timothy had learned it from someone else, or if he was still struggling with fractions, waiting for his teacher to come back and finish explaining. My doorbell rang at 2 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Helen standing on my porch, holding a casserole dish and crying. "I'm sorry," she said when I opened the door. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. You identified a body you thought was me. You had every reason to believe I was dead. But your voice, I should have recognized your voice." We sat in my living room, and she told me about the last 3 weeks, how our mother had seemed to age 10 years overnight, how Sarah had barely eaten, how she'd started planning my memorial service, choosing hymns she thought I'd like. "Helen, you couldn't have known. They planned this perfectly. But I feel like I failed you when you needed me most." I understood her guilt. When someone returns from the dead, everyone who grieved them feels foolish, as if their grief was somehow fake or misguided. "Your grief was real," I told her. "That woman in my grave was real. She had a name, Rebecca Chen, and she had people who loved her. Your grief honored both of us." That evening, Agent Chen called with updates on the case. David had confessed to avoid a murder charge, agreeing to testify against Dr. Webb's organization in exchange for a 25-year sentence instead of life. "He claims he never intended for anyone to be killed," Chen said. "He says he thought the clinic was just using unclaimed bodies." "Do you believe him?" "No. The paper trail shows he made specific requests for your physical characteristics. He knew what he was ordering." Patricia Webb, it turned out, had been training to replace me for 6 months. She'd studied video of me teaching, practiced my handwriting, even undergone minor plastic surgery to better match my appearance. "She'll serve 15 years, Chen told me. Dr. Webb will likely spend the rest of his life in prison." The answer to why David chose murder over alimony payments came from an unexpected source. Patricia, David's current wife, called me 2 days after the arrests. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need to tell you something. About David. About what he's been doing." We met at a coffee shop in the next town over. Patricia looked like she'd aged years in just days. Her hands shook as she stirred sugar into her coffee. "I didn't know about the murders," she said immediately. "I swear I didn't know they were killing people." "But you knew David was planning something." She nodded miserably. 3 months ago, he started asking me strange questions about insurance policies, about what would happen if you died. He said it was just hypothetical, just curiosity. "What changed your mind?" "Last week, after your supposed funeral, he was different. Happy in a way that didn't make sense. His wife had just died, even if you were divorced. He should have been at least a little sad, you know?" Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me text messages between her and David. "Look at this. The day after your funeral, he texted me about booking a vacation to Hawaii, a month-long trip. Who plans a luxury vacation right after someone dies?" I read through the messages. David had been planning to spend $15,000 on a vacation, plus another $30,000 on home renovations. Money he wouldn't have had if he'd kept paying me alimony. "Patricia, why are you telling me this?" "Because I found something else?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. David's computer password was my birthday. I went through his files after the arrest. Inside the folder were emails between David and Dr. Webb, starting 8 months ago. The first message was chilling in its casual tone. "Webb, need to discuss that insurance consultation we talked about. My situation has become untenable. Let's meet next week. D." Dr. Webb's response was equally businesslike. "David, I understand your frustration. We have several options available. Full consultation fee is $75,000, but results are guaranteed permanent. M.W." The emails continued for months, with David providing details about my daily routine, my physical appearance, my medical history. He'd been planning my murder since last summer. But the message that made me sick was dated just 2 weeks before my supposed death. "Webb, Margaret has been asking questions about our finances. I think she suspects I'm hiding assets. We need to move faster. Is your daughter ready to take over at the school? D." Your daughter, Patricia Webb? She was Dr. Webb's daughter? His daughter-in-law, married to his son. But David was right. I'd been training to replace you for months. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. "They showed me videos of you teaching, had me practice your lesson plans. I thought it was just method acting, you know, to be a better substitute teacher." "You really didn't know?" "Not until yesterday, when the FBI showed me the body they found. Mrs. Caldwell, that woman looked so much like you, it was terrifying, but seeing her made me realize what they'd really been planning." Patricia reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I'm going to testify against all of them. David, Dr. Webb, everyone. I know it doesn't make up for what happened, but I want to help." That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Rebecca Chen was buried under my name. Agent Chen was there, kneeling beside the grave with fresh flowers. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Some days I'm angry she's gone. Some days I'm grateful you're alive." She stood up and brushed dirt from her knees. "Today, I'm just sad that she died alone and scared." "What was she like?" "Smart, funny, struggled with depression but was getting help for it. She was a graphic designer, just starting to build her freelance business. She had plans." Agent Chen showed me a photo on her phone. Rebecca Chen smiled at the camera, holding a paintbrush in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. She looked happy, creative, alive. She deserves to have her real name on this headstone, I said. The cemetery is working on that. Rebecca Chen will get the memorial she deserves. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two women whose lives had been connected by tragedy and crime. Agent Chen, can I ask you something personal? Call me Sarah. And yes. Do you think she knew, at the end? Do you think Rebecca knew why she was chosen? Sarah Chen considered the question carefully. The coroner says she was unconscious from the car accident before the fire started. So, no, I don't think she suffered, but I think she fought. They found defensive wounds on her hands. Going back to work after being dead for 3 weeks teaches you things about human nature you wish you didn't know. Monday morning, I walked into Roosevelt Elementary carrying the same teacher bag I'd used for 8 years, wearing the same type of dress I'd always worn. But everything felt different. The hallways seemed smaller. The children's voices sounded sharper. Even the familiar smell of floor wax and cafeteria food felt foreign. Principal Rodriguez met me at the front entrance with a mixture of relief and awkwardness. "Margaret, I can't tell you how glad we are to have you back." "Thank you. How are the children handling the confusion?" "We told them you'd been in the hospital and were better now. 3rd graders are remarkably adaptable." But as I walked to my classroom, I heard whispers from other teachers. Not malicious whispers, just the natural human response to something unprecedented. I heard she was hiding from her ex-husband. The news said it was insurance fraud, but there has to be more to the story. "Can you imagine? Watching your own funeral?" Mrs. Patterson from kindergarten stopped me in the hallway. "Margaret, dear, we're all just so relieved. But I have to ask, where were you? I mean, during the funeral and everything?" I'd prepared for this question, but it still felt strange to answer. I was in protective custody. The FBI needed to keep me safe while they built their case. "But your family thought you were dead. Your poor daughter." It was the hardest thing I've ever done. In my classroom, 23 pairs of 8-year-old eyes stared at me with the mixture of curiosity and acceptance that only children possess. Timothy Morrison raised his hand immediately. "Mrs. Caldwell, were you really dead?" "No, honey. I was never dead. Some bad people pretended I was, but I was always alive." "Where were you?" "I was hiding, waiting for the police to catch the bad people." Emma Rodriguez, the principal's niece, asked, "Did it hurt?" Such a simple question, but it cut straight to the heart of everything. "Yes, Emma, it hurt very much to be away from all of you." I picked up Timothy's math worksheet from my desk, the one I'd been grading 3 weeks ago. The red ink had faded, but my handwriting was still there. "Timothy, would you like to finish working on these fractions?" He nodded eagerly, and for the first time since discovering my own funeral, I felt truly alive again. But the hardest conversation came that afternoon, when Sarah picked me up from school. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." We sat in her car in the school parking lot, watching children climb into buses and walk home with their parents. "During those 3 weeks, when we all thought you were dead, did you ever think about just staying gone?" The question surprised me with its insight. Sarah knew me well. "Yes," I admitted. "There were moments when I thought about disappearing completely, starting over somewhere else." "Why didn't you?" I watched Timothy Morrison walk to his mother's car, his backpack bouncing with each step. He'd struggled with fractions today, but by the end of class, he'd understood that 3/4 was bigger than 2/3. "Because my life here matters. My students need me. My family needs me. And Rebecca Chen died so I could keep living this life. It felt wrong to waste that gift." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you came back, but I understand why you considered leaving." That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother and asked if she wanted to come over for dinner. "Just the two of us," I said. No special occasion, just because. She arrived with grocery bags and insisted on cooking my favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same dish she'd made for my birthday every year when I was a child. "Mom, you didn't have to do all this. Margaret, when I saw you at the cemetery, when I realized you were alive, it was like getting a second chance. How many people get to hug their child after attending their funeral?" We ate dinner and talked about ordinary things. Her doctor's appointment next week, the new people who'd moved in next door, the weather forecast. But underneath the normal conversation was the shared knowledge that we'd almost lost each other forever, and that made every mundane moment precious. "Mom, I want you to know something. During those 3 weeks, the hardest part wasn't being in hiding. It was knowing you were grieving for me. Oh, sweetheart. I almost broke my cover a dozen times just to call you, just to tell you I was okay." She reached across the table and took my hand. "But you didn't. You stayed strong and let us be sad so you could stay safe. That took courage I'm not sure I would have had." After she left, I sat in my kitchen and looked around at my ordinary life. The bills stacked on the counter, the grocery list stuck to the refrigerator, the stack of papers I needed to grade for tomorrow. 3 weeks ago, someone had tried to erase all of this. They'd nearly succeeded, but I was still here, still living in my house, still teaching my students, still grading math worksheets with red ink. Conclusion. 6 months later, I received a letter that changed everything I thought I understood about my own story. The envelope was addressed to Margaret Caldwell in careful handwriting with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small photograph. "Mrs. Caldwell," the letter began, "my name is Michael Chen. Rebecca was my sister." My hands started shaking. "I want you to know that Rebecca knew. At the end, she knew why she was chosen. She left a video message on her phone, recorded the night she died. The FBI gave it to our family after the trial ended. I thought you should see it." The photograph showed Rebecca Chen holding a small digital recorder. On the back, someone had written, "For Margaret Caldwell," in Rebecca's handwriting. Michael's letter continued. "Rebecca figured out what was happening when they brought her to the clinic. She was smart, creative, and braver than any of us realized. She made them tell her your name. She wanted you to know that she chose to help you." I called Agent Sarah Chen immediately. "Is this real? Did Rebecca really leave a message for me?" "Yes." Sarah's voice was quiet. "We weren't sure if you should see it, but her brother insisted it was what she wanted." The next day, I sat in Sarah Chen's FBI office and watched a 3-minute video that Rebecca had recorded on her phone hours before she died. Rebecca looked directly into the camera, her face bruised but determined. "If you're watching this, Margaret, it means they went through with it. My name is Rebecca Chen, and I want you to know some things." Her voice was steady despite everything she must have been feeling. "First, I'm not angry at you. None of this is your fault. Your ex-husband is a monster, and Dr. Webb is worse. But you didn't choose this." She paused, touching a cut on her lip. "Second, I want you to live a good life. I know that sounds strange, but I've spent the last few hours thinking about what it means to die so someone else can live. I've decided it's only worth it if you make it worth it." Tears ran down my face as I watched this brave woman, this stranger who died in my place, giving me permission to survive. "Third, I need you to know that I chose this. When they told me what they were planning, I could have tried to escape. Maybe I would have made it, maybe not, but I realized that if I died and you lived, at least some good would come from this terrible thing." Rebecca leaned closer to the camera. "So live, Margaret. Live fully. Teach those kids. Love your family. Be happy. And sometimes, when you're doing something wonderful, remember that Rebecca Chen made that moment possible." The video ended with Rebecca placing the phone carefully on a table as if she was setting down something precious. After watching the video, I sat in Sarah Chen's office and cried for 20 minutes. Sarah handed me tissues and waited patiently. "She was remarkable," Sarah finally said. Even at the end, she was thinking about someone else. How do I honor that kind of sacrifice? By doing exactly what she asked: live a good life. The trials ended with David serving 25 years and Dr. Webb getting life in prison. Patricia Webb received 15 years, but was released after 8 for her cooperation with investigators. She sent me a letter from prison, apologizing again and asking for forgiveness. I wrote back, "Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something I choose to give. I forgive you, Patricia. Now forgive yourself and build a better life." The insurance money David had tried to steal, I donated it to establish the Rebecca Chen Memorial Fund for young artists. Rebecca's graphic design work became the foundation's logo. As for me, I kept teaching. I kept grading papers with red ink. I kept explaining fractions to 8-year-olds who thought math was impossible. But I also started saying yes to things I'd always said no to. Dinner invitations, weekend trips with Sarah, dancing lessons with my mother. Because Rebecca Chen was right. Being given a second chance at life is only meaningful if you actually live it. Every morning when I wake up in my ordinary house, in my ordinary life, I remember that someone died so I could have this moment. That knowledge doesn't make me sad anymore. It makes me grateful. And when my students ask me why I seem different since I came back from being sick, I tell them the truth in words they can understand. Sometimes bad things happen that remind us how precious good things are. My job is to make sure you know how precious you are. Timothy Morrison finally mastered fractions. He's in 5th grade now and stops by my classroom sometimes just to say hello. He doesn't remember that his teacher once came back from the dead, but he remembers that she believed he could learn anything if he tried hard enough. That's the legacy I choose, not the woman who survived her own murder, but the teacher who helped children believe in themselves. Rebecca Chen made that choice possible. I wake up every day determined to make her sacrifice worthwhile. If you've stayed with me through this incredible journey, I have one small request. Take a moment today to appreciate something ordinary in your life. A cup of coffee, a conversation with a friend, even the simple act of breathing freely. Those moments are gifts, and they matter more than we usually realize. Until next time, remember that your life, your ordinary, beautiful, irreplaceable life, is worth fighting for. Margaret Caldwell.